So we're going to run this application as a Spring Boot app. So we're going to go up here and enter this URL. We're going to go back to our Spring Boot. And here we can actually see that the browser sent an HTTP GET request to the server. So by looking in the logger and seeing the log statement in the IDE console, it's showing that the controller method was reached in the default Jeep sales controller. The method that was reached is this method here. You could see that the model equals Wrangler and the trim equals Sport, which is what we wrote in the URL. So that was one way of making that run. What we're going to do is we're going to clear the console again. And another way of doing this is by going to our local host, Swagger. And we're going to be using the browser to navigate to the open API documentation to send a GET request to the server with a valid model and trim level. So we're going to go and we're going to use the GET method. We're going to click on try it out. And we're going to input, let's see, a different thing, Cherokee. We're going to write Sport, and we're going to execute this. We're going to go back to our console and see it was executed. See, this time the model is Cherokee and the trim is Sport. We could see the curl, the command that it used in order to get that onto the console. We can see the request URL, and we can also see the response headers. The next part of the assignment is to run the integration test and show that the test is actually green. So we're going to run this as a JUnit test. And it did. It came up as green. And we can see here that it actually called the controller method because it logged model, Wrangler, and trim as Sport. The following steps of this project was to add a method to the test that would return a list of expected Jeep models. So right here is where we created the method to return a list of expected Jeep objects based on model and trim. As you can see right here, we assert that the actual list of Jeeps returned by the server is the same as the expected list. So what we're going to do is actually run this as a JUnit test again, and this time it should fail. It failed. And that's because it was expecting the null to be equal to these two Jeeps, but it actually came back null. I made sure to print out the expected so that we could actually see down here. So as you can see, it printed out the two Jeeps down here. It had everything. So it did work, but it just didn't run as expected. So the next part of the project was to create a service package with the Promenio Tech Jeep. In this package, I created a class named Default Jeep Sales Service that implements the Jeep Sales Service interface. For this step of the project, we wanted to show this class implemented as well as its logline. So what we're going to do is we're going to run it as a JUnit test. So as you can see, it failed. And if we look at the log line, it says debug default Jeep sales controller. It says model Wrangler trim Sport. And info, it says default Jeep sales service. So if we go over here and we look at that, you'll see that it says the fetch method was called with the model Wrangler and Sport. For the next step, I'm supposed to show you my finished application of YAML and the console showing that the application has started with no errors. So here we go. I'm going to go over here. We're going to run it as an actual Spring Boot app. And there we go. Started Jeep sales in 3.394 seconds. And the final step, I want to show you the application / test YAML, which shows this URL. And this URL is going to override the URL in the application.yaml to point to the H2 database. And that's the end of the project.